there's.
Why are we still talking about this? This has nothing to do with Mac versus PC.
Yeah, I know. Well, you brought it up. I was going to skip over it. But anyways, moving on. Okay, of the plethora of oh dear God stuff to go into, what do we want to mess with?
I like the Honeycomb tablet.
I don't
I'm a Google fanboy. What do you think I'm going to pick?
Okay, yeah, the Xoom. Okay. It is Xoom. We talked about this some on Linux. It is what it is. I don't like the preferential treatment that Motorola is getting because I think it's a lose-lose for the consumer. That being said, the Xoom looks like a great device. It really does. We're not going to really have a clue where it stacks up for this year until the iPad 2 comes out. And maybe they'll hold the iPad 2 off because dear Steve is sick. He's just so ill and we don't know why. It's like, but...
So don't be a total jerk about it. That's sick.
No, here's my honest assessment why I think Apple isn't saying anything on Steve there. I think they're trying to prove that Apple as a company can run fine without Steve Jobs. So they've just said Steve Jobs is on leave. Because think about it, they have two big announcements coming up here in the next few months. And if Steve Jobs is gone between now and the time they take those announcements, and the iPad 2 rolls off smoothly, the iPhone 5 rolls off smoothly, or whatever updates they make to the if these things all bloom, mature, and roll off smoothly over the next few months entirely without Steve Jobs, then Apple as a company has proven will do fine when Steve Jobs eventually kicks the bucket, because he's not going to be around forever. And it's one of those things, like Steve Jobs goes on leave, Apple stock goes. So they're trying to dissociate Apple's success from Steve Jobs for the longevity of the company. And I honestly do think that's what's going on here.
It's good. It's a good idea.
It's like, because the reality is this is one of those times where odds are the updates to the iPhone and the updates to the iPad, because of what they're probably going to be, are going to be very smooth, very logical things. If there's anything where Apple just knows unequivocally, Steve Jobs goes away, we can still do this without him, it's probably this. Yes. And you've noticed this, like in the last keynotes, it's not all Steve Jobs talking. It's like, and now my good friend from Department XYZ, Apple is trying to prove we will be fine when Steve Jobs dies. It's like, he's not going anywhere, but he is 70-something. We need to prove to you SOBs that Steve Jobs is not Apple. Overall, Honeycomb looks like it's. I have not seen a price point for the Xoom. Has anybody seen a price point for the Xoom? Like,
no, not yet.
It's one of those. I really think it needs to be the baseline one needs to be between $300 and $500. I really do think that's where it needs to be.
Either way, though, even if it is competitive with the iPad price-wise, which is not difficult to be, but even if it is, they seem to have solved the problem that of the tablets just being a giant phone.
Well, no, that was the thing. It's like I was never going to buy any of these Android phone OSs on a tablet form factor. I was like, I'm glad you're like pushing Android first, but the Galaxy Tab is not a good device because that's fine. It was one of those, no. If you want to judge Android in the tablet form factor, judge it by Honeycomb, and you're right. But Honeycomb very much fixes that problem. That being said, Android now has some very steep competition when it comes to its holy grail, and that is multitasking. And that's the BlackBerry device, that BlackBerry OS that's actually true multitasking, and it is. It's true multitasking. However, you know, it's not to pull a page out of the Apple fanboys thing, but the thing people are very questionable on that thing is what's its battery life going to be at. That being said, if they can figure out a way to get even 3 hours out of that thing, everybody's saying I want like 4. If they can figure out a way to get 2 to 3 out of that BlackBerry OS thing, I think it can really give Android tablets a run for their money, and I think that's a good thing because that means we have 3 good players now in that arena, which is always a good thing. I think it'll make everybody just a little bit better. Any thoughts on that one way or the other, James?
As far as I need to really see more of the Xoom to judge it.
That is the problem with the Xoom right now, and that we've seen the official commercial and the CES demo. But actual reviewers have not really gotten their hand on it. I'm going to tear it apart. I'm going to do the things it's not designed to do. I'm going to use it in real world conditions. That's the other reason. It's like if anybody got a price point on it, because if it costs $1,000, I don't care what it does. It's a fail. I'm serious. Yeah. It's like I love Android, but if it's $1,000, fail. It needs to be. There needs to be. Even if it's not necessarily the one power users like us want to buy, the entry-level Xoom needs to be as close to $300 as possible. Less if possible, but given the hardware in it, I'm not seeing that. But if they can make it,
if they could make the hardware similar to the Nook, it might be good enough.
Well, see, I think that'd be a mistake, and the reason I say that is because of the pseudo multitasking that Android does. You do want to put a good chunk of hardware behind it, so that when a user gets a little open, the device is still running smooth, and like it or not, that takes a good chunk of hardware and memory. So if you cheap out on that, you get too many of those. Wait, force close. Yeah. Wait, force close. No. You need to put enough hardware behind it that the average user, 125% of what the average user is going to throw at this isn't going to overload it. I'm not saying people like us that are going to go, I need more. We're going to...
Is that still true with Honeycomb? I know they introduced a more aggressive garbage collection thing.
There's a more aggressive garbage collection, but in the same way you can overload any system, there's that tipping point at which you're trying to use 120% of the available resources. And when you reach that point, things don't run smoothly anymore. It's like, and if you allow multitasking or pseudo-multitasking, the ability to reach that point exists. This is part of why Apple is so anti-multitasking. They're like, we will not allow this thing to approach 90% of its possible resources, so it never, ever overloads. That's the Apple philosophy. I personally would like the ability to be a dumbass if I want to. Because then I can actually use 100% of the device, with the understanding that if I ask for 101%, the device will punch me squarely in the face. But that's my opinion.
Right.
But it's weird name, son. I guess this really does beat the Atom. Before the Xoom, I was looking at the Atom, but I think the Xoom, at least for 2011, is probably... If you're looking for an Android tablet, that's probably the one you want.
I gotta say, I did really like their tablet commercial, the Tablet Evolution commercial.
Oh, that reminds me, I didn't send it to y'all. There was an email going around I love. It had Steve Jobs dressed up as Moses. And he had 2 iPads.
Used to have 3, but this was the Mel Brooks version.
Yeah. Well, no, but see see, we'll have Mel Brooks dressed up as Steve Jobs next year. That's like, That was a joke in more way than one, considering there's way more than 10 commandments in the Jewish. Okay, anything else we want to say on the Honeycomb stuff or something? I hope we get more info on Honeycomb, but the reality is all we really have is flashy demos right now. On that note,
Android and strange form factors, we could maybe talk about Google TV.
Well, before we get onto that, let's make some pseudo predictions for the iPad 2.
Alright.
Because there's been almost no reliable rumors on the iPad 2, with the exception of they're making cases. I'm going to go out on a whim and say the same thing I said in iWorld and say, okay, I know this is a stretch, but I think it's going to have a camera. I'm just...
At least a front-facing camera, almost definitely, seeing as how much they're betting on FaceTime.
Right. Now the other debate going on for iOS devices is, do you think Apple's going to embrace LTE this run, or because they just released on Verizon, wait another year? My personal theory is they're going to wait another year. You're not going to get LTE out of Apple this year.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing on that is, do you think Apple's ready to embrace the idea of multi-core chips for their primary, you know, they're going to be like an A5, that's the dual or tri-core version of the ARC processors?
No, I think hardware-wise it'll probably be a bit of an incremental release. They'll probably just support some of the things that they've been adding to their other systems, such as FaceTime.
I tend to agree with you there. However, I think that's a real dumb thing for Apple to do. And the reason I say that is because, with few exceptions...
I think the first iPad was a dumb thing for Apple to do.
Well, no, but with few exceptions...
Well, it did make a bunch of money.
Yeah, but I mean, except for like the cheapy stuff, like, and I mean the stuff that's like $99, $129. You know, the stuff that's $99 to $149. But pretty much anything else, the stuff that's subsidized to be $200 or on sale for more than $200 right now, which is the league, at least price-wise, that all of Apple's stuff in this arena is in. You know, the iPhones, the iPad, the iPod Touch, is dual, fixing to be tri-core. So the real question is, can Apple really afford, especially with the tipping point going on at this point of Android is fixing to overtake them if they don't do something now, can Apple afford to be that outdated in hardware for at a minimum of another year?
Sure they can.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they can.
They have such an isolated architecture that most people just can't leave. And so they won't, even if Apple does something stupid like, I don't know, just...
It's the 1.2 gigahertz single core! It's like, that's probably...
Just, why would you do more than you need to? That would be dumb from a financial point.
Well, but...
Apple goes for the highest margin, and they're going to try to get the highest margin that they can, and they don't need to go yet. They don't need to move up yet.
Okay.
Especially after they just went to Verizon.
Oh, yeah. Guaranteed, I guarantee you, in the next few weeks, minimum of 1 million phones. Pains me, but I guarantee it. It's like... Alright, okay, you were talking about Google TV, Leo?
Yeah. It's tanking.
Is it?
Yes! And don't take this the wrong way, I think it should tank. It's a joke. Just like... Google TV is as much of a joke as Apple TV. I liked the idea because I'm like, okay, great, it's going to be Android-based, it's going to sound... Then I actually saw what Google TV was. I'm like... It's like, the reality is, of these set-top boxes, the only one that makes any sense to buy right now is something like a Roku box. Because it starts at $100. You get Netflix, you get Hulu, They now have cable stations signing on board. It's Roku makes sense because I hope I'm saying the right. Yeah, it's Roku. But Roku makes sense because, for all intents and purposes, for $25 a month, with very few exceptions. The few exceptions are stuff like BBC, Canadian broadcast, things that aren't included in Netflix and Hulu. You get, with at most a week or two delay, everything you're getting from the cable and satellite company, except you're getting it for $20 to $30 a month, as opposed to $50 to $100 a month. And that is what this whole thing has always been about, cutting the middleman out, cutting my bill in half, and that's what the end user cares about. And the only box that does that in a way that grandma can operate at the right price point with enough of a library is something like a Roku box.
Alright, I gotta go plug in my laptop. Be right back.
I think that you're probably not far off as far as how it actually played out or whatever. That, yeah, Google TV is turning out to be something of a joke, but
it was a great idea.
And it's less living up to it's not living up to its potential, rather than it's a joke in concept.
Oh no, well, no, it's a great idea. It's been a great idea since 1996 when Time Warner tried to do it. This has been the box of the future since I was not me, but
just the thing is, I'm seeing a market around where I am where people actually be hooking up their entire computers to the kind of thing, and if you could create a simplified TV form factor that actually fit that, I think that could be very popular. It's just the current iterations of Google TV are not that.
Well, it's not just that. There's also a generational thing here. And this is a thing with all paradigm shifts in technology, in that good, wrong, right, or indifferent, our parents, the baby boomers, are the largest generation in America right now. Therefore, what makes sense to them is what people are going to want to make, and is what's going to sell well. And the reality is, it's like the first thing people our age thought about when they saw that rail thing that GM made. They're like, have you thought about gyro controls and like joysticks and things? Like, have you thought about making my car actually function like a video game so I can do 0-point turns on the road and shit? And they thought about that. And then they gave the car to James May. And he said, literally, he could not focus on the steering wheel grip. It's like he was afraid to drive the car. And that's the reaction our parents get to paradigm shifts in technology. And the reality is, the problem with this technology is, how do you make all of these buttons that are on a keyboard as simple as a mouse? Click, click.
I think that Nintendo got it right, actually, and I think that Google should try to steal things like the Wii as far as controlling Google TV.
Oh, honestly, the thing that makes the most sense for controlling something like a Google TV or an Apple TV device or devices like this to make them sound is to just throw out the idea of a traditional UI and form factor and go for something like a Kinect thing. Go for the whole Minority Report thing. Go for grandma blinks at the TV properly. It's like grandma's looking at the TV and she starts to look. It analyzes her eyes and it realizes she's thinking about going to this thing, so it just does it for her. But the software you'd have to write so that it doesn't do it accidentally when grandma doesn't want it to. But that's the UI that has to have, so that you don't actually need the keyboard to talk to it unless you want to.
A Wii style control with a microphone might be good enough, though.
It might be. But right now, in its current incarnation, there's no way I could. I don't want a Google TV. You think I'm honestly going to sit here and say, yeah, I love Google. Go buy a Google TV. I'm like, no.
I want a Google TV. I just don't want the constant Sony and...
Well, you're a Google fanboy. It's like... Anything to add on that, James? Or
as far as Google TV?
Yeah.
Well, as far as I know, it's extendable, so I don't see why it can't. I mean, it runs on Android, and you could program for it like you program for Android, right?
Yeah, except it's not really Android. It's yet another OS.
It's Android in the same sense that Honeycomb is.
Yeah. So it's optimized for a different form factor. So the thing is, I think that's actually the mistake going on with Google TV, to be honest, and that it's being treated like another Android device. And there's a shitload of things that make sense for Android and its other form factors that make no sense whatsoever in a television box form factor. And I think that's one of the big problems with Google TV. It's like I'm almost thinking it shouldn't be Android. I'm thinking it should be another OS that's compatible with Android, but isn't Android. I realize at the end of the day, Android is Linux, so really all I'm saying is Google, go back to the drawing board a little bit and make another Linux build optimized for this. But it's like...
I definitely disagree with Steve Jobs. He thinks that people just won't buy the set-top boxes, and I think that this is a little too much like the video game boxes that we shove in there to give up all willy-nilly like that.
Well, no, like that's the thing. It's like I said, the only one that really makes sense right now is a Roku box. It's like it can't cost an arm and a leg. The reality is these Google boxes cost an arm and a leg. They're not cheap.
Or did before nobody was buying them.
Yeah, but they're still expensive for what they are.
Yeah, fair enough.
Anyways, what were you saying, James?
I wasn't saying anything.
Okay.
Oh, well, I mean, I was just talking. I thought it ran on Android, so I thought that you could. I mean, you say that it's. I mean, it could be, it could be improved in the same way that Android could. Someone could make, custom UI or something like that.
Yeah.
Like Roku.
Someone could do that. The big limitation right now is the lack of secondary content, and the reality is, if you've seen the remotes for these Google TV things, what they are is they're basically a BlackBerry. They're the remote buttons with a little query keyboard on them, and it's like that's great for geeks like us. My mother would take one look at that remote and go, "I want nothing whatsoever to do with this device. It looks way too complicated." She wouldn't even touch it. I just know.
I want nothing to do with that remote.
So what?
I want nothing to do with that remote.
I know. It's like, and you're a technical person. It's like
the Logitech one is nicer, but all they did was, here's a keyboard, have fun.
Yeah, it's like, and it's what. That's to me the big problem with the thing. It's like
I'll definitely agree.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm a geek. I have gone the whole media center thing. I've built a media center box. I turned entire control of recording my shows, managing everything over to a media box, to a computer. I spent a whole weekend putting it together, plugging all the boxes together through those little infrared adapters, through little low-speed data connection things through COM ports to get everything talking to each other, get everything going great. The advantage to that is I spend a weekend setting it up and I leave it alone. I leave it alone. I simplify it then to a big fancy television remote to control everything. If it's anything more complicated than that to control once it's set up, even an uber geek doesn't want to futz with it. Is like, I have the option to pick up my keyboard when I'm searching the guide and go, you know, I don't feel like going A. No, I just want to type and have the autocomplete going. It's not. But aside from that one thing, and the better softwares, you just start pressing 1, 3, 5, and it starts typing things out. If the UI becomes cumbersome, it doesn't matter if it's good. You just go, fuck it, I don't want to deal with it. Doesn't even matter if it's saving you money at that point, because, you know, DVRs from the cable company, there's a monthly fee for them for the most part, and every so often the cable company just decides, well, you've had enough time to watch your stuff, let's nuke your box and erase everything.